This screencast is on Christina Rossetti and her poem Goblin Market. Christina was the youngest child in the Rossetti family. In this photo, you see Dante Gabriel here, Christina sitting on the steps, her mother, and her brother William Michael. Her father was an Italian exile who studied Dante Alighieri, who wrote that's the Dante who wrote the Divine Comedy, and her father tried to find evidence within Dante's writing of ancient conspiracies. He was considered some kind of kook by most people. Christina Rossetti herself was a very religious woman. She even turned down two offers of marriage because one of the men was not religious enough in her opinion, and the other had converted to Catholicism. As it turned out, she never married. Her religion, in fact, affected every aspect of her life, going well beyond what most people would consider normal. She might have gotten some of these tendencies from her dad. For instance, she gave up chess because she found she enjoyed winning too much. She pasted little paper strips over the anti-religious parts of Swinburne's Atalanta in Caledon, which she said allowed her to enjoy the poem very much. And she objected to nudity in painting, especially if the artist was a woman, and she absolutely refused even to go see Wagner's Parsifal, which was an opera, because it celebrated a pagan mythology. So she had some very strong opinions. Rossetti spent her life doing volunteer work. No, not this kind of volunteer. She served as a volunteer for 10 years at the House of Charity, an institution located in Highgate, which was devoted to the rescue of prostitutes and unmarried mothers. Her brother, Dante Gabriel, was a famous artist, as we saw before, one of the founders of the pre-Raphaelite movement. The two of them collaborated on his work, with Christina serving as a model for him, and on her work, Dante Gabriel illustrated many of her poems, including Goblin Market. This is his illustration for the cover page of Goblin Market, published in 1862. I find it unbelievable that when it first came out, many people thought of it as a fairy tale and read it to their children as something of a moral fable. They must not have read it very carefully. Let's look at some of the more important passages from the poem, and I think you'll see what I mean. On the surface, the poem is just about some goblins trying to sell delicious fruit. But as we've learned through our reading, poets often employ extended metaphors to get their point across to their readers. Laura says to Lizzie, "We must not look at goblin men, we must not buy their fruits. Who knows upon what soil they fed their thirsty, hungry roots?" Think about what they are selling, fruit. What would a very religious woman associate fruit with? Obviously, temptation. Eve eating the fruit in the Garden of Eden, and then tempting Adam with it. So we should equate the fruit with temptation. But with what kind? When Lizzie is covered with fruit later in the poem, Laura is afraid that her sister will be like her, quote, thirsty, cankered, goblin-ridden, unquote. Rossetti is giving us so many clues as to her meaning. Roots, cankers, another name for sores, and being ridden by the goblins. If you haven't gotten it yet, she's talking about sex. In lines 44 and 45, she's saying that you never know who these men have had sex with before they had sex with you. The thirsty reference is an awakening of sexual desire, thirsty for more. Cankered, of course, has to do with STDs, and goblin ridden, well, if you think of the missionary position, that reference should be pretty clear. Already you should be as freaked out as I am that people read this to their children. I mean, geez Louise. These are a couple of Dante Gabriel's illustrations of the goblin men and their fruits. The very first words that we hear from the goblin men are in lines 3 and 4. Come buy our orchard fruits. Come buy, come buy. If they want the women to have their fruits so much, why don't they just give them away? It's not as though the women would have much money. But sweet-toothed Laura spoke in haste. Good folk, I have no coin to take word to Purloin. I have no copper in my purse, I have no silver either. And all my gold is on the furze, that's a type of flower that shakes in windy weather above the rusty heather. You have much gold upon your head, they answered all together. Buy from us with a golden curl. She clipped a precious golden lock. She dropped a tear more rare than pearl. Remember what they're selling. It's not fruit, it's sex. Is sex ever really free for a woman, especially a woman back in Rossetti's time? Isn't there always a price to pay for a woman to have sex? Notice that Laura paid with a lock of her hair, a part of her body. So, what do the goblin men look like? We'll take a closer look at one of Dante Gabriel's illustrations. The nice thing about these is that he's working closely with his sister Christina when he drew them, so we can assume that this is how she envisioned them. What do they look like to you? Could she be saying that men are animals? I don't know about you, but it seems pretty plain to me. So Laura buys the fruit and eats it. She sucked and sucked and sucked the more fruits which that unknown orchard bore. She sucked until her lips were sore, then flung the emptied rinds away, but gathered up one kernel stone and knew not was it night or day as she turned home alone. I find Rossetti's reference to the kernel stone to be really interesting. Basically, a kernel stone is a seed, which makes me think that maybe Laura has become pregnant by her encounter with the goblin fruit. There's another reference to the kernel stone in lines 281 through 87. One day, remembering the kernel stone, she set it by a wall that faced south, dewed it with tears, hoping for a root, watched for a waxing shoot. But there came none, it never saw the sun, it never felt the trickling moisture run. Now, as you may or may not know by now, I tend to be something of a literary geek. I love this stuff and I love talking about it. My friend Sarah, who I went to grad school with, disagrees with me on my reading of this kernel stone, and we've had some really heated debates about Rossetti's meaning here. I say that Laura loses the baby. It was either stillborn or a miscarriage. She had hoped that it would grow, but that never happened. My friend Sarah, on the other hand, thinks that the kernel stone was a seed of knowledge, a sexual awakening, and that this passage is talking about masturbation. Laura is trying to recreate the pleasure she felt with the goblin men, but is unsuccessful. I can see Sarah's point here, but I'm too stubborn to let her know. Either way, though, I can see why Rossetti is so obtuse here. If she is talking about masturbation, it certainly wouldn't be something that she'd want to just put right out there for her readers. In lines 141 through 61, we have the cautionary tale about Jeanie, another girl who dealt with the goblin men. Lizzie met her at the gate, full of wise upbraidings. Dear, you should not stay so late. Twilight is not good for maidens. Should not loiter in the glen in the haunts of goblin men. Do you not remember Jeanie? How she met them in the moonlight, took their gifts, both choice and many, ate their fruits and wore their flowers, picked from flowers, where summer ripens at all hours. But ever in the noonlight she pined and pined away, sought them by night and day. In other words, she went man crazy. Found them no more, but dwindled and grew gray. Then fell with the first snow, while to this day no grass will grow where she lies low. I planted daisies there a year ago that never blow. In other words, they never grow. They never bloom. So Lizzie is worried that Laura will follow the same path as Jeanie, who has died as a result of her encounter with the goblins. The two sisters sleep in each other's arms. Now, please don't think this is weird. Most siblings shared a bed in those days. Golden head by golden head, like two pigeons in one nest, folding in each other's wings, they lay down in their curtained bed, like two blossoms on one stem, like two flakes of new fallen snow, like two wands of ivory tipped with gold for awful kings. Moon and stars gazed in on them. Wind sang to them lullaby. Lumbering owls forbore to fly. Not a bat flapped to and fro round their rest. Cheek to cheek and breast to breast, locked together in one nest. So the two women are like birds. They are. It's like they are just locked together in this nest, this comfort. And it sounds like everything is okay until you look at how Dante Gabriel has illustrated Laura's dream, and this is up here. She is no longer like her sister. Her sister is sleeping peacefully, and Laura is dreaming about the goblin men. But when they go out the next day, only Lizzie can hear the cries of the goblin men. Laura can no longer hear them. Laura turned cold as stone to find her sister heard that cry alone, that goblin cry. Come buy our fruits, come buy. Must she then buy no more such dainty fruit? Must she no more such succour as a pasture find? Gone deaf and blind, her tree of life drooped from the root. She said not one word in her heart's sore ache, but peering through the dimness, not discerning, trudged home, her pitcher dripping all the way. So crept to bed and lay silent till Lizzie slept, then sat up in a passionate yearning and gnashed her teeth for bulk to desire, and wept as if her heart would break. Why can't she hear them any more? Consider our metaphor. Laura has had sex with the men, but Lizzie is still a virgin. Which one would the goblins be more interested in? Once they have had Laura, she is used and has lost her value to them. When Laura decides to go get some fruit for her sister, she insists on paying for it with a penny rather than with her body. She's not interested in the fruit for herself, but wants to take it to her sister who is fading away because she can no longer get it. This really angers the goblins, who literally attack her. They begin to scratch their pates, no longer wagging, purring, but visibly demurring, grunting, and snarling. One called her proud, cross-grained, uncivil. Their tones waxed loud, their look were evil. Lashing their tails, they trod and hustled her, elbowed and jostled her, clawed with their nails, barking, mewing, hissing, mocking, tore her gown and soiled her stocking, twitched her hair out by the roots, stamped upon her tender feet, held her hands and squeezed their fruits against her mouth to make her eat. They are forcing their fruit upon her, a sexual assault. Something that I think is really interesting here is that Rossetti has shortened her line length in these lines. It makes you read faster and builds up the tension of what is happening. In lines 408 through 421, she stands firm against their assault. Rossetti gives us several analogies and ends with, like a royal virgin town topped with gilded dome and spire, close beleaguered by a fleet mad to tug her standard down. Lizzie resists them. They are attacking her body, but Lizzie won't let them attack her essential nature, her soul. Afterward, she runs back to the cottage, to Laura. She cried, Laura, up the garden. Did you miss me? Come and kiss me. Never mind my bruises. Hug me, kiss me, suck my juices, squeezed from goblin fruits for you, goblin pulp and goblin dew. Eat me, drink me, love me, Laura, make much of me. For your sake I have braved the glen and had to do with goblin men. Lizzie is Christ-like here with her eat me, drink me. She has sacrificed herself for her sister. Laura is overwhelmed with the sacrifice Lizzie has made for her. She can't believe that her sister has done this. She licks the juices from Lizzie's face and realizes that the juices are bitter, that they are not sweet like she remembers them. At the end of this stanza, she falls into a swoon. We're not sure if she has died or not, but in the next line, line 524, we learn that it is life out of death, in other words, resurrection. Because of Lizzie's sacrifice, Laura is resurrected into a new life. The last stanza of the poem fast forwards years into the future. Lizzie and Laura are mothers with children of their own. They warn them against the goblin men, just as they were warned when they were children. Rossetti finishes the poem with, For there is no friend like a sister, in calm or stormy weather, to cheer one on the tedious way, to fetch one if one goes astray, to lift one if one totters down, to strengthen whilst one stands. When she is talking about sisters here, she's talking about all women. That if, like Lizzie, they would sacrifice themselves to help their fallen sisters, that those women could be saved. This is Rossetti, the volunteer at the House of Charity, telling us that fallen women can rise again to lead happy lives, if only we will not turn our backs on them. Thank you.